On a deserted highway in Colombia, a lone woman grips the steering wheel of a massive cargo truck. The road ahead is dark and winding, the kind of path where trouble lurks unseen. Behind her, a group of armed motorcyclists follows closely, their engines humming like predators on the hunt. They believe she's just another easy target, an unsuspecting driver in the wrong place at the wrong time. They couldn't be more wrong. Her name is Valeria Cruz, and she is no ordinary truck driver. At 38 years old, she carries a past few could imagine. A retired Navy SEAL, she walked away from the battlefield after a mission in South America went horribly wrong. Since then, she's been searching for a quiet life, one free from violence and the ghosts of her past. But some wars don't end just because you leave the battlefield. Tonight, Valeria is simply delivering a shipment of medical supplies, a legal job, nothing dangerous, or so she thought. A powerful cartel believes she is a government informant. Somewhere along the way, someone whispered the wrong name to the wrong people, and now she's being hunted. She doesn't know why they're after her, but she does know one thing. She won't go down without a fight. This story is a thrilling ride of action, suspense, and relentless danger. Follow Valeria as she faces ruthless enemies, uncovers deadly secrets, and proves that the skills she once tried to leave behind may be the only thing keeping her alive. Don't miss this adrenaline-packed journey. Subscribe for more content like this. You won't want to miss what happens next. The night stretched endlessly over the Colombian highway, a ribbon of asphalt winding through dense jungle. The rhythmic hum of the truck's engine was the only sound keeping Valeria Cruz company, steady and familiar. She had driven long-haul routes before, but something about this particular journey made her uneasy. Maybe it was the job itself, too simple, too convenient. Or maybe it was just her instincts sharpened by years of combat, whispering that trouble was near. She had taken the job 2 days ago, accepting a cash offer from a middleman in a dusty border town. The cargo was legitimate, medical supplies destined for a rural clinic. No questions asked. Just drive, deliver, and disappear back into the quiet life she had been trying to build. But quiet never seemed to last. Glancing at her side mirror, Valeria's eyes narrowed. 2 motorcycles had been following her for the past 10 kilometers. At first, they had kept a casual distance, blending into the sparse traffic. Now they had closed the gap, their headlights glowing like predatory eyes in the dark. She didn't react, didn't tense. Instead, she kept her movement steady, her foot firm on the gas pedal. If they were just passing through, she wouldn't give them a reason to notice her. But if they were tailing her, she needed to be ready. The road ahead was isolated, flanked by towering trees and broken by occasional roadside stops. A perfect place for an ambush. She tapped her fingers against the steering wheel, thinking, if they wanted to make a move, they'd do it soon. She couldn't afford to be caught off guard. Her radio crackled softly with a local news broadcast. Reports of cartel violence were becoming more frequent. Truck hijackings, disappearances, bodies found dumped in the jungle. She exhaled slowly. Stay calm. Assess. Plan. The motorcycles weren't passing her. That was the first sign something was wrong. Regular bikers would have overtaken her by now, moving ahead toward their destination. But these 2, they were watching her, waiting. A gas station sign loomed in the distance, 5 kilometers ahead. It wasn't much, but it was something. A public place, even if barely occupied this late at night. If she stopped, she might be able to get a better read on them. If they stopped too, she'd have her answer. Or she could keep driving, try to lose them. But that risked drawing attention. If they were looking for an excuse to act, running would give them one. She made her decision. Easing off the gas, she let the truck slow naturally. The motorcycles adjusted their speed, mirroring her. Not a coincidence. The gas station was small, its single pump barely illuminated by flickering fluorescent lights. A tired-looking clerk sat behind the counter inside the convenience store, his face lit by the glow of his phone screen. A lone car was parked near the entrance, its driver slumped against the wheel, fast asleep. Valeria pulled up to the pump and turned off the engine. The sudden silence felt heavy. The motorcycles didn't stop immediately. They circled once, slow and deliberate, before pulling over near the road's edge. The riders kept their helmets on, but even in the dim light, she could feel their eyes on her. She climbed down from the cab, keeping her posture relaxed but aware. Every step was calculated, measured. She was unarmed, at least in appearance, but that didn't mean she was defenseless. The station air smelled of gasoline and stale coffee. She took her time unscrewing the gas cap, keeping her movements casual. One of the bikers dismounted, a tall man with a thick scar running down his cheek. He didn't speak right away. He didn't need to. His posture, the way his fingers flexed near his belt, said enough. Valeria met his gaze, unreadable. The night air thickened. This was it. Ramon Montoya stood on the balcony of his estate, staring out at the city below. The lights of Medellin stretched into the distance, pulsing like veins of fire through the mountains. This was his empire, built with blood, fear, and precision, and he would burn the whole thing down before letting anyone threaten it. A knock at the door. "Enter," he said, not bothering to turn around. A wiry man in a dark jacket stepped in, his hands clasped in front of him like a nervous schoolboy. Esteban, the informant. His presence was both necessary and irritating. Ramon had no patience for men who talked too much. "Jefe," Esteban began, voice hushed. "We have a problem." Ramon finally turned, his expression unreadable. "Go on." Esteban licked his lips, a nervous tick. "There's a woman, a truck driver. We think she's a government informant." Silence. Ramon didn't move, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Are you guessing, or do you have proof?" Esteban hesitated. Not a good sign. "She took a job moving medical supplies, but the way she operates, it doesn't fit," he continued. "She's too careful, too trained." That word caught Ramon's attention. Trained. Who is she? Valeria Cruz, ex-military. Some say American, some say Colombian. We don't have much, but she's not just a driver. Ramon considered this. The cartels had no shortage of enemies. Federal agents, rival syndicates, local vigilantes. But an unknown element in his territory. That was unacceptable. "And you're sure she's alone?" Esteban nodded. "Yes, Jefe. But she's dangerous." A slow smile spread across Ramon's face. Dangerous was fine. Dangerous could be dealt with. "Where is she now?" "Last spotted heading south. A couple of our men are already tracking her. If she's what we think, we'll have her by morning." Ramon exhaled, rubbing his jaw. If she was truly an informant, she would break under pressure. If she wasn't, well, he'd find out soon enough. He turned back toward the balcony. "Good," he said, "bring her to me, alive." Back on the highway, Valeria could feel the weight of the biker's gaze on her, cold and assessing. Scarface, as she mentally dubbed him, hadn't moved since stepping off his bike. His silence was almost worse than a threat. She finished fueling the truck and reached for her wallet, playing the part of an oblivious driver. Inside, her mind raced. Who were they? What did they want? Scarface took a slow step forward. "Long night, huh?" he said, voice gravelly. "Something like that," Valeria replied, keeping her tone even. "You traveling alone?" There it was, the real question beneath his fake conversation. She met his eyes, holding his stare just long enough to let him know she wasn't easily rattled. "Just me and my truck," she said, handing a few bills to the gas station clerk. "Got a delivery to make." Scarface nodded, glancing at the truck. "Yeah? What you hauling?" "Medical supplies." "That right?" His tone was too casual now, laced with something heavier. She could see the thoughts turning behind his eyes. Behind him, the second biker remained seated, helmet still on, watching. Valeria kept her body loose, ready. If things went south, she needed a plan. She could take Scarface in a fight. His stance was lazy, confidence making him careless. But the other one? She couldn't read him yet. Scarface shifted, pretending to adjust his belt, but she saw the holster at his hip, armed. Of course. The gas station clerk glanced between them, sensing the tension but knowing better than to interfere. "Are you sure you're just a driver?" Scarface asked, tilting his head. Valeria forced a smirk. "What else would I be?" He chuckled, but there was no humor in it. "Guess we'll find out," he muttered. He turned, heading back to his bike. Valeria watched as he leaned in, whispering something to his partner. A moment later, both engines roared back to life. They didn't leave. Instead, they pulled onto the highway just ahead of her truck and slowed their speed. They wanted her to follow. Her stomach clenched. This wasn't random. Someone had sent them. She climbed back into the truck, locking the doors out of habit. Her hands settled on the wheel, but she didn't start the engine yet. She had a choice: follow and walk into whatever they were planning, or take another route and risk them forcing her off the road. Neither option was good. She exhaled. Think, plan, act. She turned the key, the truck rumbling back to life. The motorcycles idled ahead, waiting. She had no choice but to keep moving. For now. The truck's headlights sliced through the darkness as Valeria followed the motorcycles down the isolated highway. The road was narrowing, flanked by thick jungle on both sides. Not good. Too many blind spots. Too many places to disappear. She adjusted her grip on the wheel. They were leading her somewhere. For the past 20 minutes, the bikers had kept a steady pace, just ahead of her, forcing her to maintain their rhythm. She could turn back, but that would mean making it obvious she was onto them. If they were looking for an excuse to act, she wasn't going to hand it to them. Up ahead, a gas station appeared. A small roadside stop, barely more than a shack with a single pump and a flickering neon sign. The motorcycles pulled in without hesitation. This was it. Valeria's heart remained steady as she maneuvered the truck into the lot. Keep calm. Watch everything. Scarface was already off his bike when she parked. His partner, still helmeted, stayed back, a silent figure in the shadows. Valeria shut off the engine and climbed down, moving slow. She made a show of stretching, as if this were just another routine stop. "Thought you might need a break," Scarface said, flashing a grin. "Didn't realize I had company," Valeria replied. "You do now." A casual threat. She glanced around. The place was nearly deserted. The gas station clerk from before was gone, replaced by an older man who barely looked up from his newspaper. A single truck was parked on the far side of the lot, its driver missing. Too empty, too quiet. Scarface leaned against his bike, watching her. "You in a hurry?" "Always," she said. He chuckled. "Relax. Just a friendly conversation." Valeria knew better. This wasn't a conversation, it was a test. They wanted to see if she'd run, if she'd break. She didn't. Instead, she took a slow step toward the convenience store. Let them think she wasn't worried. Let them make the first mistake. Scarface's eyes followed her. Then he nodded toward the truck. "Mind if we take a look at your cargo?" There it was. Valeria exhaled, tilting her head. "What for?" He smirked. "Curiosity. You know what they say about curiosity." Scarface's smile widened. "Yeah, it gets people killed." Behind her, the second biker shifted slightly, still silent, still watching. Valeria held Scarface's gaze. "This is a medical supply run. You got a problem with that?" He pretended to consider it. "Depends. You see, in my line of work, we don't like strangers moving things through our backyard without permission." There it was again. Not a question, a statement, a warning. Valeria crossed her arms. "Didn't know I needed permission to help sick people." Scarface's smirk faded. He was testing her patience, pushing buttons, trying to figure her out. She let the silence stretch, refusing to react. She needed to make them uncertain, to plant doubt. Finally, he exhaled. "Maybe we'll check the truck later," he said. "For now, how about a drink?" He nodded toward the convenience store. Valeria hesitated. Walking inside meant giving them control of the space. Scarface watched her closely, as if waiting for an excuse to act. She had to play this carefully. She shrugged. "Why not?" Scarface's grin returned. "That's the spirit." They entered the store together. The old clerk barely glanced up as Valeria stepped inside. The air smelled of stale cigarettes and cheap beer. Scarface grabbed 2 bottles from the cooler and handed one to her. She accepted it, keeping her movements casual. Then, for the first time, the second biker removed his helmet. He was younger than she expected. Mid-20s maybe, but his eyes were sharp, focused. "This is Miguel," Scarface said. Miguel didn't smile, didn't speak, just watched. Valeria met his gaze. This one was the real problem. He wasn't testing her. He already knew. She twisted the cap off her bottle but didn't drink. Scarface took a sip, then leaned against the counter. "You know, people don't just pass through here unnoticed." Valeria smirked. "Funny, I was just thinking the same thing." Scarface chuckled. "I like you. You got nerve." "Yeah?" she said. "Then let's cut the bullshit. What do you want?" Miguel finally spoke. "To know who you really are." His voice was quiet, but there was no mistaking the weight behind it. Valeria's pulse remained steady. They were past the small talk now. Scarface tapped his bottle against the counter. "You're coming with us." The air in the store tightened. Valeria didn't move. "That so?" Miguel nodded. "Just for a little chat." Valeria scanned the room, calculating. The exit was too far. 2 of them, 1 of her. She needed another play. "All right," she said, setting the bottle down. "Let's chat." Scarface's smirk returned. Outside, the night swallowed the sound of approaching footsteps. The trap had been set, and Valeria had just walked in. The ride was silent. Valeria sat in the back of a beat-up SUV, hands resting on her lap, gaze steady. Scarface, whose real name she had yet to learn, drove, while Miguel sat beside him. Two more men whom she hadn't seen at the gas station were crammed in the back with her, both armed. She had expected them to take her to a secluded spot off the road, maybe a warehouse or a hidden jungle outpost. Instead, they had driven into the outskirts of a small town, weaving through narrow streets until they stopped in front of a warehouse on the edge of an industrial district. A controlled space, fewer witnesses, fewer exits. The doors unlocked with a mechanical click. "End of the line," Scarface said. Valeria stepped out, slow and deliberate, taking in her surroundings. The warehouse was surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. Inside, dim yellow lights flickered over stacks of shipping containers. It smelled of oil, metal, and damp concrete. No cartel insignia, no banners or flags. A temporary base, easy to abandon if needed. Scarface led the way, motioning for her to follow. The others flanked her, careful but not careless. They were trained, not military, but disciplined enough to be dangerous. They entered a side door, stepping into a large open space where a single man sat at a wooden table. He was older than the others, early 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a neatly trimmed beard. He wore a black button-down, sleeves rolled up, revealing tattooed forearms. Ramon Montoya. Valeria recognized him immediately. So, this wasn't just any cartel. This was his cartel. Ramon gestured toward a chair. "Sit." She didn't move. Scarface, who clearly worked for Ramon, exhaled through his nose. "Don't make this difficult." Valeria smirked. "You already kidnapped me. That's pretty difficult." Ramon chuckled. "Fair enough." He leaned forward, resting his forearms on the table. "I'll be direct. Who do you work for?" Valeria tilted her head. "Funny. I was going to ask you the same thing." A muscle in Scarface's jaw twitched. Miguel, standing near the door, watched in silence. Ramon smiled. "Clever, but we both know you don't belong here." Valeria shrugged. "I'm a truck driver. I move cargo. You've got the wrong person." Ramon exhaled, nodding as if considering her words. "Medical supplies, right?" "That's right. And yet, two of my men, experienced men, say you don't act like a truck driver. You act like a soldier." Valeria met his eyes. "Maybe I'm just good at my job." Silence. Ramon studied her, his gaze calm but probing. Then he reached into his pocket and placed something on the table, a folded piece of paper. "One of my informants believes otherwise," he said, unfolding it. It was a grainy photo. Her, taken from a distance, probably at a previous job. She kept her expression neutral, but inside she was calculating. Someone had identified her. But who? And why? Ramon leaned back. "I don't like unknowns, Valeria. So tell me, who are you really?" Valeria exhaled. She could lie, keep up the act. But she had been in enough interrogations to know that the longer she stalled, the worse things would get. So instead, she shifted tactics. "You think I'm an informant," she said, "but I'm not. You know how I can prove it?" Ramon raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Go on." "You have a rat in your organization," she said, watching his reaction carefully. "Someone is feeding you bad information. If I were an informant, I wouldn't be here. I'd be sending in a strike team to take you down." The men around her stiffened. Ramon's expression didn't change, but the way his fingers tapped against the table told her she had hit something. He suspected something already. Valeria pressed on. "Whoever told you I'm a threat, they're lying. And you should ask yourself why." Miguel shifted slightly, exchanging a look with Scarface. "Good. Doubt." Ramon exhaled, then stood. "You make an interesting argument, Valeria." He turned to Scarface. "Lock her up for now." Valeria clenched her jaw. Not a great outcome, but not the worst. Scarface grabbed her arm, but she didn't resist. Not yet. They led her down a narrow hallway to a reinforced door. Inside, the room was sparse. Just a metal chair and a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. As the door slammed shut behind her, she took a slow breath. She wasn't here to survive. She was here to win. And if Ramon Montoya had a rat in his cartel, that was a weakness she could use. She just had to find out who it was. The dim light bulb above Valeria flickered, casting restless shadows against the concrete walls. She sat in the metal chair, legs stretched out, head tilted back, waiting, watching. They had taken her weapons. Not that she had been carrying much, but they hadn't searched her thoroughly, a mistake. Arrogance made men sloppy. Footsteps. The door creaked open, and Scarface stepped in. Behind him, Miguel followed, arms crossed. "You comfortable?" Scarface asked, his tone almost amused. Valeria smirked. "You could have at least brought me a drink." Scarface chuckled, but Miguel didn't. He stayed by the door, watching. "We talked to the boss," Scarface continued. "He thinks you're full of shit." Valeria shrugged. "So do most men. Until they realize I'm right." Scarface rolled his eyes. "Let's say for a second that you are. That someone inside is feeding us bad intel. Why would they lie about you?" "Maybe they wanted me dead before you figured out the truth," Valeria said. "Maybe I know something they don't want me to say." Scarface's smirk faltered for just a second. Miguel, however, didn't react at all. Valeria's mind worked fast. He's too controlled, too quiet. She had spent years spotting liars, manipulators. Scarface liked power, but Miguel knew something. Valeria leaned forward. "How long have you worked for Montoya?" Scarface scoffed. "We're the ones asking questions here, lady." Miguel, however, finally spoke. 5 years. Valeria nodded. "And in those 5 years, how many people have suddenly turned into government informants?" Silence. Miguel's gaze darkened, but Valeria saw it. The flicker of hesitation. Scarface snorted. "Enough talking." He grabbed her by the arm, pulling her to her feet. "Boss wants to see you again," he muttered. They led her back down the hallway toward the main warehouse floor. Something was coming. The breaking point, Ramon Montoya stood by the table, a cigar burning between his fingers. He glanced up as they entered. "Valeria," he said smoothly, "I've been thinking about what you said." She said nothing, waiting. He exhaled, tapping ash into a tray. "You claim there's a rat in my cartel." "I don't claim," Valeria said. "I know." Ramon nodded as if considering. Then he turned to Scarface. "Kill her." The words hit like a gunshot. Scarface didn't hesitate. He pulled his pistol, aiming it at Valeria's head. But before he could fire, the warehouse exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupted from the far side of the building. Shouts, running footsteps. Valeria reacted instantly. She slammed her heel into Scarface's knee, twisted his wrist, and the gun went off, missing her by inches. Miguel lunged for her, but she pivoted, grabbed Scarface's pistol from his hand, and fired, one shot, clean into his chest. Scarface dropped. Ramon, now alert, reached for his own weapon, but Valeria was faster. She grabbed Miguel, yanking him between them. "Who's attacking?" she shouted. Miguel struggled. "I don't—" More gunfire. The warehouse doors burst open. More men stormed in, but they weren't Montoya's. Valeria recognized the way they moved. A rival cartel. Ramon's own men returned fire, ducking for cover. Miguel wrenched free, drawing his gun, but he didn't aim at Valeria. He aimed at Ramon and fired. Betrayal. Ramon staggered back, clutching his side, eyes wide with fury. "You—" Miguel shot him again. Valeria didn't hesitate. She grabbed Scarface's rifle and dove behind a crate, returning fire against the invading cartel. Miguel took cover next to her. "You were the rat," she muttered. Miguel reloaded. "You were just an excuse. They were going to move on Montoya anyway." Valeria gritted her teeth. She had been bait, a distraction, but she wasn't going to die here. She turned her rifle toward the men flooding into the warehouse. Time to fight. The warehouse was a battlefield. Gunfire rattled through the air, echoing off the steel walls. Valeria crouched behind a stack of crates, gripping her stolen rifle. Across from her, Miguel was reloading, his face tense but composed. Bodies littered the floor. Montoya's men had been caught off guard, and the rival cartel was pushing forward, taking advantage of the chaos. Valeria's mind worked fast. She couldn't stay here. The fighting would only end one way, with the warehouse burned to the ground and everyone inside dead. She locked eyes with Miguel. "You working with them?" she asked, nodding toward the invaders. Miguel shook his head. "I was working against Montoya, didn't expect these bastards to hit tonight." Valeria exhaled. Not an ally, but not her enemy. Yet. A burst of gunfire tore through the crate beside them, splintering wood. Miguel winced. "We gotta move." Valeria's mind was already there. "Back exit?" Miguel nodded. "Yeah, but they'll have it covered." Of course they would. No easy way out. A scream cut through the gunfire. Valeria glanced past the crates. Montoya was still alive, wounded but fighting. His remaining men were scattering, some surrendering, some dying where they stood. The rival Cartel was winning, which meant they'd be sweeping the building soon. Valeria clenched her jaw. Time to disappear. She scanned the warehouse. There, a second-floor catwalk leading to a maintenance hatch. If she could get up there, she could slip out before they locked the place down. She turned to Miguel. "Do what you want, but I'm leaving." Before he could respond, she moved. Fast, precise, deadly. She vaulted over a crate, firing a burst at the gunman blocking her path. 3 shots, 2 hits, 1 down. Miguel cursed and followed, laying down cover fire as they sprinted toward the catwalk ladder. More gunmen stormed in from the main entrance. Too many. Valeria didn't slow. She reached the ladder, grabbed the rails, and climbed like hell. A bullet whizzed past her ear. Another slammed into the metal just inches away. She pulled herself onto the catwalk, then turned, covering Miguel as he scrambled up behind her. Below the warehouse was a war zone. Montoya was dead now. She could see his motionless body on the floor. The rival Cartel had secured their victory, which meant they'd start cleaning up loose ends. Valeria shoved open the maintenance hatch, revealing the night sky. The jungle loomed beyond, dark and endless. Miguel hesitated. "You coming or not?" she demanded. For a second, she thought he might stay. Then, with a sigh, he followed her through the hatch, and the jungle swallowed them whole. The chase begins. The moment they hit the ground, Valeria ran. The jungle was thick, humid, alive with insects and distant animal cries. The ground was uneven, the roots treacherous, but she moved fast, weaving through the trees like a shadow. Miguel was right behind her, breathing hard. "They'll come after us," he muttered. Valeria didn't slow. "I'm counting on it." Because if they thought she was running blindly, they'd chase her head-on, and that was exactly what she wanted. Behind them, shouts rang out. Flashlights cut through the darkness. The Cartel had noticed their escape. Miguel glanced back. "Damn it!" Valeria yanked him down behind a fallen log. "Stay quiet." The search party spread out, sweeping the jungle. They weren't rushing. That told Valeria one thing: they knew these woods better than she did. Miguel wiped sweat from his forehead. "We need a plan." Valeria scanned the terrain. The jungle was dense, but she could use that. She pointed to the east. "There's a river about 1 kilometer that way, fast current. If we reach it, we can lose them." Miguel hesitated. "You sure?" She nodded. "Trust me." He exhaled. "Fine. But if this goes wrong, I'm blaming you." Valeria smirked. "Get in line." They moved fast, keeping low, avoiding dry branches and loose stones. The Cartel was close. Too close. Valeria heard a gun being cocked just meters behind them. Damn it. No more time for stealth. She grabbed Miguel's arm. "Run!" The jungle erupted with gunfire. The jungle came alive with chaos. Gunfire cracked through the trees as Valeria and Miguel sprinted through the dense undergrowth. Leaves and branches whipped against her face, but she didn't slow. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and being herded. But she had one advantage. The jungle was a battlefield she could control. "Move!" she barked, shoving Miguel forward as a bullet ripped through the trunk beside them. The sound of the river was growing louder. Close. Miguel stumbled, but Valeria grabbed him by the back of his shirt, yanking him upright. "Don't stop!" A flash of movement ahead. More gunmen cutting off their escape. Shit! Valeria scanned the terrain. No way through, no time to double back. Then she saw it. An old hunting trail branching off to the left, barely visible under the overgrowth. She made a split-second decision. "This way!" she hissed, veering off the main path. Miguel followed without question. They ducked into the shadows of the trees, pressing low as the gunmen passed just meters away, unaware they had changed direction. Valeria's pulse steadied. Now she had breathing room. "Where are we going?" Miguel whispered. Valeria kept moving. "We can't run forever. We need cover. We need weapons. And we need to turn this hunt around." Miguel frowned. "And where exactly do you plan on finding all that?" Valeria didn't answer, because up ahead, hidden beneath thick vines and rotting foliage, she saw exactly what she needed. An abandoned cabin. Regrouping. The cabin was old, forgotten, barely standing. The roof sagged and the walls were covered in moss, but it was shelter. It was defendable, and it was now home. Valeria pushed the door open, her rifle raised. Empty. Miguel exhaled, slumping against the wall. "Hell of a night." "Not over yet," Valeria muttered, moving through the room, checking exits, searching for anything useful. A rusted machete leaned against the wall. A few empty shotgun shells littered the floor. Then in the corner she found it, a wooden crate filled with supplies. She pried it open. Inside were old hunting knives, a handful of shotgun shells, and a small pistol, low caliber but better than nothing. She tossed the pistol to Miguel. "You know how to use this?" Miguel checked the chamber. "Yeah, I'm not useless." "Good, then make yourself useful." He rolled his eyes but started reinforcing the windows with whatever furniture he could find. Meanwhile, Valeria pulled out her knife and began rigging the cabin. Traps, barricades, kill zones. She wasn't just hiding. She was preparing for war. A larger threat. As she worked, Miguel spoke. "You really think we can take them?" Valeria didn't stop. "I don't plan on fighting them all." Miguel frowned. "Then what are we doing?" Valeria glanced at him. "We make them think we're still running. Draw them in, pick them off one by one, confuse them. Make them scared." Miguel rubbed his jaw. "You sound like you've done this before." "I have." He hesitated. "What were you before all this?" Valeria smirked. "A truck driver." Miguel snorted. "Right." Silence fell as they continued setting up. Then Miguel spoke again, quieter this time. "I heard what Montoya said before he died. That this wasn't over. That bigger cartels would come." Valeria tightened her grip on her knife. She had heard it too, and it meant one thing. Whoever had betrayed Montoya wasn't just after him. They wanted complete control. Miguel shook his head. "We're not walking away from this, are we?" Valeria exhaled. "Not if we keep running." Miguel met her gaze. Then, slowly, he nodded. "All right," he said. "Then let's make them regret chasing us." Outside, the jungle remained eerily quiet, but Valeria knew better. They were coming, and she would be ready. The jungle was silent, too silent. Valeria crouched near the window of the abandoned cabin, gripping her rifle. The traps were set, tripwires rigged with crude explosives, sharpened stakes hidden under leaves, and fire traps made from old oil cans. She had done her part. Now it was time to wait. Miguel sat across from her, pistol in hand. His leg bounced, his nerves showing. "How long do you think before they find us?" Valeria didn't take her eyes off the tree line. "They already have." Miguel tensed. "Then why haven't they attacked?" Valeria exhaled. "Because they don't know what they're walking into." She pointed toward the jungle. In the distance, shadows flickered between the trees. The cartel's men were here, hunting, searching, but hesitant. Good. Valeria reached into her pocket and pulled out a small satellite phone, her last ace. She pressed a single button, a prearranged signal. Then she whispered into the receiver, "It's time." Miguel frowned. "Who the hell are you calling?" Valeria smirked. "An old friend." Setting the bait. The first man stepped into the clearing. Valeria watched as he moved cautiously, rifle raised. His eyes scanned the ground, but he didn't see the tripwire. The explosion was small, a flash of fire and pressure, enough to throw him back and disorient the others. Shouts erupted. They knew now. This wasn't an ambush, this was a trap. Miguel exhaled. "Here we go." More gunmen emerged from the trees, firing wildly. Their panic was their weakness. Valeria lined up a shot. One squeeze of the trigger, one body dropped. Miguel fired next, taking down another. The jungle lit up with chaos. Ramon's successor. As bullets ripped through the night, Valeria spotted someone new. A man standing at the edge of the tree line, not rushing forward like the others. He was watching, calculating. She knew instantly. He was in charge now. Ramon Montoya was dead. This was his replacement. And whoever he was smarter than the rest. He pulled out a radio and spoke into it. Moments later, Valeria heard the low, unmistakable hum of a helicopter. Miguel's eyes widened. "They have air support," Valeria cursed. This wasn't just a cleanup operation. They weren't here to capture her. They were here to erase her. "We need to move," Miguel said. Valeria shook her head. "Not yet." She wasn't done. The last stand. The cartel's men regrouped, pushing toward the cabin. Valeria and Miguel fired back, but their ammo was running low. The helicopter was getting closer. If it had a mounted gun, they were dead. Then, a new sound. A second helicopter. But this one wasn't theirs. Miguel glanced at Valeria. "Tell me that's your friend." Valeria smirked. "Told you." The second helicopter roared overhead, its spotlight cutting through the trees. Then, gunfire from above. The cartel's men scrambled as a tactical strike team rappelled down, weapons ready. Miguel gaped. "Who the hell are they?" Valeria chambered her last round. "Former Navy buddies. Let's finish this." The cartel fought back, but they were outmatched. Valeria moved like a ghost through the battlefield, taking down enemies with ruthless precision. Miguel fought beside her, covering her blind spots. Within minutes, it was over. The cartel's leader, the man who had replaced Ramon, was dead. The rest fled into the jungle, and just like that, the hunt was over. The aftermath smoke curled into the night sky. Bodies lay scattered across the jungle floor. Valeria stood in the clearing, watching as her allies secured the scene. One of them, a tall man with a military build, approached her. "You always did know how to start a war," he said. She smirked. "And you always did like showing up late, Torres." Torres chuckled. "You good?" Valeria nodded. "For now." Miguel stepped forward. "And me, what happens now?" Torres studied him. "Depends. You sticking with her?" Miguel hesitated. Then he glanced at Valeria. She raised an eyebrow. His choice. After a beat, he exhaled. "Yeah, I am." Torres shrugged. "Then let's get moving." Valeria took one last look at the battlefield. Then she turned away. This fight was over, but she knew it wouldn't be her last. The cartel was in ruins, but Valeria knew better than to celebrate. There was always someone bigger, someone watching. And tonight, she was about to meet them. The tactical team had swept the jungle, ensuring no survivors were left to report back. But as Torres and his men packed up, a radio crackled. "Unknown vehicle approaching from the north," a soldier's voice reported. Torres tensed. "More cartel?" Valeria's gut told her otherwise. "No," she muttered. "Something worse." The headlights of a convoy cut through the darkness. Black SUVs, tinted windows. Not local, not the same cartel they just wiped out. Torres's team moved into position, weapons raised. The SUVs stopped. Silence. Then, the back door of the lead vehicle opened. A man stepped out. He was older than Ramon Montoya had been, but more refined, sharper, dangerous in a different way. He didn't wear the bravado of a drug lord. He carried the aura of a businessman, the kind who owned people rather than killed them himself. Valeria felt Miguel shift beside her. He felt it too. The man smiled. "I was hoping we'd meet under better circumstances, Ms. Cruz." He knew her name. Valeria didn't flinch. "You have me at a disadvantage." The man gestured vaguely at the destruction around them. "That depends on how you see things. I believe we have common enemies." Torres narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" The man ignored him, his attention fully on Valeria. "You've disrupted business in this region, but Montoya was small time. What happens next depends on you," he said. Valeria's fingers twitched near her holster. "You're here to recruit me." A slow smile. "I'm here to give you a choice." The last battle Torres' earpiece crackled again. "We've got movement." 6 o'clock. Valeria's heart pounded. It was a trap. From the jungle, more men emerged, well-equipped, disciplined, not cartel thugs, mercenaries. Miguel cursed under his breath. Shit. The businessman, whoever he was, had come prepared. Valeria's jaw clenched. "Let me guess, if I refuse, I don't walk away." The man sighed. "It's nothing personal, Ms. Cruz, but you've proven yourself problematic. Either you work for us, or you don't work at all." Torres raised his rifle. "You want to find out how problematic we can be?" A flick of the businessman's fingers. His men raised their weapons. Standoff, Valeria calculated. She was outnumbered, outgunned, but not outplayed. She glanced at Torres. He caught the signal. "Move." She dove. Gunfire exploded around her. She rolled behind cover as Torres' team opened fire. Miguel fired beside her. "What's the plan?" Valeria ejected her spent magazine. "Kill them all." They fought like hell. The mercenaries were trained, but Valeria's people were better. One by one, the businessman's men fell, but Valeria wasn't focused on them. She wanted him. She pushed forward, using the chaos to slip through the firefight. The businessman was retreating toward his SUV. Not today. Valeria sprinted. He turned just as she reached him, drawing a pistol. She knocked it aside and drove her knife into his shoulder. He grunted, staggering. She pinned him against the SUV. "Who sent you?" His eyes burned with something that wasn't fear. "You think this ends with me?" She twisted the knife. "I think you're about to find out." A single gunshot rang out. The businessman's body slumped. Valeria turned. Miguel stood behind her, pistol smoking. He met her gaze. He wasn't gonna talk. Valeria exhaled. It didn't matter. Because the moment that man had stepped out of the SUV, she had known. He was just a messenger. The real enemy was still out there, and they had just declared war. The gunfire had faded, leaving only the heavy scent of blood and smoke. Valeria stood amid the wreckage, pulse steady but mind racing. Something didn't feel right. Miguel wiped dirt from his face. Think that was the last of them? Valeria shook her head. No. A sharp whistle cut through the air. Then, an explosion. The blast sent Valeria to the ground, her ears ringing. Before she could recover, gunfire erupted from the jungle. More men, more enemies. Miguel cursed. Where the hell did they come from? Valeria pulled him behind cover. The businessman had been a distraction. The real force had been waiting. A voice rang out. "Hold your fire!" The shooting stopped. Through the smoke, a figure emerged. A woman, tall, composed, dressed in tactical black. Miguel tensed. "Who the hell is that?" Valeria swallowed hard. She knew exactly who it was. The woman smirked. "It's been a while, Cruz." Miguel glanced between them. "You know her?" Valeria's stomach tightened. "Yeah, I do. Isabella Delgado, former Black Ops. Ghost. Predator." Torres staggered to his feet. "Delgado? As in—" "Yes," Valeria cut in. Isabella stepped closer. "You've stirred up quite the mess, but you always were reckless." Valeria ignored the bait. "What do you want?" Isabella tilted her head. "Options. Walk away, disappear, or—" She smiled. "Join us." Silence stretched. Miguel exhaled. "You've got to be kidding me." Valeria's fingers twitched near her holster. "And if I say no?" Isabella's smirk didn't fade. "Then you won't get another chance." Valeria's chest tightened. The war hadn't ended. It had just begun. Isabella turned. "You have 24 hours. Then, like a ghost, she vanished into the jungle. Miguel let out a slow breath. Well, that was terrifying. Torres frowned. "What's the plan, Cruz?" Valeria didn't answer. Instead, she looked at the darkness where Isabella had disappeared and prepared for what came next. The night felt heavier than before. The jungle was silent again, but not because the danger had passed. Something had shifted. Valeria sat on the edge of a fallen tree, wiping dried blood from her knuckles. Miguel stood nearby, pacing, while Torres checked in with his remaining men. No one spoke. They all felt it. The fight wasn't over. Miguel finally broke the silence. "So, what now?" Valeria exhaled, staring at the dirt beneath her boots. "We leave. Regroup." Torres crossed his arms. "And after that?" Valeria looked up. The choice still hung in the air. Isabella Delgado, a ghost from her past now standing at the crossroads of her future. If she walked away, she could disappear again. Let someone else fight this war. But she knew better. They wouldn't let her go. And more than that, she didn't want to run anymore. She clenched her jaw. "We find out who Delgado is really working for." Miguel frowned. "And then?" Valeria stood, rolling her shoulders. The answer was simple. "Then we burn them to the ground." A soft beep interrupted them. Valeria pulled a small, unregistered phone from her pocket. A single message glowed on the screen. "Unknown caller. This is just the beginning." Miguel read it over her shoulder. "Well, that's not ominous at all." Valeria smirked, flipping the knife in her hand. "Good," she muttered. "I was getting bored." She tucked the blade away, turning toward the jungle. The night swallowed them once more, and the hunt began again.